It's another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin. And this is a very special week. Week 14 of college football, essentially the end of the regular season. We're not talking Army, Navy. This is just the end for us. So this is our final week of badges for 2024, Collin.
It's a beautiful moment. It's almost like a send-off, but it's obviously not a send-off for us because we'll continue talking about these players in a more big picture, rankings, mock drafts, etc. down the road. But this is the last time, you scope in on the single week performances and highlight some of the guys and, maybe I would say break some records for amount of badges, but that's been done weeks ago with one of these guys.
Yeah, it feels good. We were talking like it feels right. It's time to move forward with this. Talked about it last week. I mean, rookie mock 2.0 and the first one that's like really starting to like with a season behind us. That's next week. So it's beginning very quickly. Rankings 2.0 will follow shortly. But before we get into all of that, end of the year. And there's a few different things before we jump into the badges. A few things that caught my eye when I'm thinking about the end of this season. And first of all, we have two declares, official declares for the NFL draft. It is that time of the year, baby. Luther Burden and Caleb Johnson both officially putting their name into the NFL draft.
It's beautiful that this is the time of year it is. Like, we have been waiting on bated breath for a lot of these players that are juniors to see if they come back to school or not, because like some of these guys you expect to go into the NFL draft and then they end up going back to school and it's like, oh, now I got to reshuffle my whole rankings, especially guys that are higher up. You'd think back to like Devin Neal last year, Charbonnet a few years ago. It's like they can really, throw a wrench into things, especially when, Luther Burden is like towards the top of the wide receiver market and a class that like we have a lot of questions at wide receiver. So it's great that he's going in. I mean, hopefully the rest of these guys do, and we don't have to worry too much about it.
And Caleb Johnson, I mean, that was one where, I think we were both kind of on the same page at this point. Like, he's going to be one of the top backs in the class. I would be shocked if he went back to school, but also we've seen that happen with Zach Charbonnet and Travion Henderson, like two top backs in a class that end up going back. So it's good to see him officially putting himself into the NFL draft. We've thrown some shade over the course of this year at 2026. And if you're like me, if you're listening to this, I assume that you're like me in some ways, which is that what's happening now is never good enough. We're always thinking 2 or 3 steps into the future. And I'm filling out my 2026 kind of tinkering with my watch list that's still, 10 months away from even becoming an idea. But curious if you had the same experience where there were a few guys down the stretch of this season that kind of emerged a little bit, some names for 2026. So I know we've kind of said, hey, move those 26 picks, get them into 27. I think that's still very real. But yeah, I got, there's a couple of guys here. Jeremiah Love, the running back from Notre Dame, had a really, really good season, ended really strong. So he's a name that I'm looking at in the running back class next year. And then Makai Lemon from USC. We thought it would be Zachariah Branch or Deuce Robinson, wide receivers from USC. But Makai Lemon had a great year for them. He was their best receiver in that group for 2026. So a couple of guys just shouting them out here because, why not? It's a fun time in college football, wrapping things up.
Yeah. And then, you have the name Arch Manning, who will head the quarterback department. He looks like a lot of fun. And then for the IDP side of things, Caleb Downs looks like a freak at the safety position. So like there are definitely names at the top of this 2026 draft that are going to matter and going to make a huge difference. It's not that it's going to be like overall top to bottom bad. I don't think we're going to get a whole lot of those anymore. But it's just like you look at the tantalizing 2027 receivers that we saw pop, especially early in the season. It starts to pull your eyes that way a little bit.
Oh, well, how about Jeremiah Smith? Last thing. I mean, Jeremiah Smith, there's a lot of names. We've talked about a lot of names even already from 2027 wide receivers, but Jeremiah Smith finishes his true freshman season at a premier program with 1,000 plus yards receiving and 10 touchdowns. So
unreal.
If there was any doubt of who the big prize is in 2 years from now, even amongst all those other guys, Ryan Williams and everything, Jeremiah Smith is that dude.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ryan Williams also like great season, ended up like 850 and 8 touchdowns, but like, yeah, that Jeremiah Smith season is special. And like, if he only builds on that for 2 more years, he's probably going to get tagged with that beautiful generational prospect tag that we all know and love.
Comes out every two to 3 years.
Every generation, right? That's
right.
If you look, an average NFL career lasts like 2.7 years.
Well,
there you go.
There it is.
Generation.
Now it makes sense. All right. That's enough about the future. We got a lot of years ahead of us to cover all those names. How about what's cooking for 2025? Last slate of badges. Interesting. We're hitting a bunch of positions. We're hitting some top names. We even got a few new names at the very tail end of the season here. So, but we're kicking things off with a name that is very familiar, a player that has accumulated a ton of badges this season and will be one of the top running backs in the 2025 class, and that is Omarion Hampton. He is getting the out with a bang badge from me this week, because despite the fact that North Carolina State won the rivalry game against North Carolina, Omarion Hampton did what he does, which is produce on the ground and in the receiving game. 22 carries for 185 yards and a touchdown, plus 4 catches for 77 yards and another touchdown. So another huge explosion, well over 200 total yards in this game, and an incredible season for Omarion Hampton.
Yeah, this is like a special season from a player that I think you called a shot early on in the season where you're like, man, Omarion Hampton, he's going to carry the load in the post-Drake May UNC era and going to dominate. And then, they lose their now starting quarterback week 1 of this year. And it's like wheels up for Omarion Hampton. He's going to get as many touches as possible. And in every game that he got at least 18 touches, he got over 100 yards on the ground. It's like, man, this is a special player. 6 yards a carry, 1660, like in a non Ashton Jeanty world. And that's the world we live in, the Ashton Jeanty world. But in a non-Ashton Jeanty world, like we would be having a different kind of conversation about Omarion Hampton.
Yep. So you said it, 1660. That was he built on his 1,500 yard season from last year, and that is second in college football in rushing yards following the regular season. Also 7th in receiving yardage for running backs. So a very productive player, a player that has this pass catching acumen that is very sought after these days in the NFL. And this week, I mean, he was. We're gonna get into all of it when we get into rankings 2.0. I know the season grind kind of turns into like what are the numbers on the page look like, but we've talked a lot about Omarion Hampton and his blend of speed and power, and that's everything you saw in this game again. I mean, running through contact, over 100 yards after contact again this week. And 10 missed tackles forced, which, I mean, that was one of his higher marks of the season, most since week 1. So it was an incredible week for him, doing the things that we expect from him, and a great exclamation point on his, college career, assuming that he will not be playing in any bowl games for North Carolina. I don't even know if they're eligible, honestly. I think they might have only won 5 games this year.
If he does play in a bowl game, he would need 61 rushing yards for the most in a single season in UNC history, and 134 for third in UNC history as a junior, which is impressive. So maybe opt in to chase a couple of records, but I don't know. That it's just like I wanted to see him like repeat what he did last year and grow on it a little bit, because I was a little bit skeptical about him coming in, and just blew my expectations out of the water. And I don't know, like they started throwing him the ball too, more and more. And it's like, thank you, because we love seeing our guys get the ball in space. He had 4 catches for 77 yards in this one. Like, that's a stretch of at least 3 catches going back to week 4. It's like, he's getting the ball. They're tossing it out to him. We've talked about it a few times, but it's always nice to see that. Get your guys easy touches in space.
Yeah, he almost won them this game. That little pitch pass. They've done that like how many times? I feel like every time we've talked about him, that comes up when you're watching the game tape, and like he's got the speed, man. He gets that pitch and he just leaves, and he scored on that play, gave him the lead, and unfortunately the defense dropped the ball for North Carolina in this game. But all right, let's talk about another one of the top names in this draft class.
Yeah, so Travis Hunter is back. He's getting the Heisman badge, which we've given out a couple times to a couple different guys, but this was like a certified Heisman moment game from Travis Hunter, where he goes 10 catches on 14 targets for 116 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had an interception on the other side. I'm not going to gas that up too much, because that was just a horrible throw from the quarterback. It was like basically triple coverage, and Travis Hunter's like, I guess, like, I'll take it. But nonetheless, we've talked about Travis Hunter all season. We've talked about the Heisman race all season. I don't know if it's wrapped up, if it has a bow on it or not, but I mean, having this be the exclamation point in your final week with, I mean, over 100-yard receiving, and doing that 7 times on the year, and then a hat trick, is pretty impressive. So get spurned by the girlfriend, get some love on Camp Dynasty.
I mean, Dion made sure that Travis Hunter had a grand finale to his career, because they were playing up huge in this game. They kept him in, Shedeur and Travis Hunter and everybody else still in this game. Travis Hunter catching, ridiculous touchdown passes when they're up by like 45 points. But regardless, I mean, it was a special season. We talked about the debate, should he win the Heisman just because he plays 2 ways? Well, no, it's not just because he plays 2 ways. It's because he's one of the best wide receivers in college football and one of the best cornerbacks in college football. So I think right now it seems like he is on trajectory to win the Heisman, and it seems like that's where this is going. But it was an incredible season for him, and we've talked a lot about the mystery that will be coming up, and we will get to dive very deep into that here over the next few months as that question gets picked at a little bit more as we get into real draft season and people start wondering and asking the question of, how is this guy going to play in the NFL? What is his primary position going to be? But you see numbers like this, you see the plays that he makes, even just in this game, but everything else over the course of the season that we've talked about. And I mean, there's no question about it that he has taken a huge step forward this year as a wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a very exciting idea when you talk about this upcoming draft class and where a player like Travis Hunter might sit at the end of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a player that can do it both ways, and a guy that has produced in every single game where he's gotten, more than 3 targets. It's like, it's pretty compelling, and it seems like the media is leaning that way. Colorado is sending out the propaganda to the voters with the like gold foil, the Heisman with the 12.
They're so easy to root against, man. I'm sorry.
It really is. So, but all that being said, he wouldn't be undeserving of the award.
All right. Well, we've talked about a couple of the tippy top names of this class, but how about a new name in week 14? And how about a new IDP name to talk about? And that would be Boston College's Donovan Ezeirauku is how I believe it is pronounced.
I'm impressed. It sounded pretty smooth.
So Ezeirauku, that wouldn't be the first time I'm wrong. Like, we're going to play back this tape next week and be like, oh, that was not even close. But Ezeirauku had a phenomenal year, a truly phenomenal season. He's a player that I have wanted to bring up at points this season and just couldn't get him into the show. We've talked a lot about that. It's hard to just get 8 guys into a week, and especially IDPs. But this week, he left nothing up for debate. This was his best game of the season against Pitt. He had 12 total pressures, a season high, and he's had a lot of them this year, but 12 in this game and 4 sacks from PFF, 3.5, I think, from the more traditional stat keeping records. So however you slice it, it was an incredible week. I mean, he was wreaking havoc in the backfield the whole game. He had 6 stops in this one too. And a few of those, I know that's kind of a more nebulous number, but watching the game, he had at least 2 tackles for loss in the run game as well in this one. Little bit of background about who this is. What does he do? 6'2", 247, so undersized for an edge player. I have read that he does have longer arms than 6'2" would suggest, so that would at least be a check mark in the right direction for him there. But definitely a speed rusher. I mean, that's very apparent with his burst and his bend. His bend is very, very good, and he works the speed rip like over and over. The right tackle for Pitt really could not match up with him in this game at all. There were times when he would try to go to a power move, and that was with much less success than his speed moves. But I think even then, seeing the sort of impact that not only he made in this game, but also over the course of the season with 59 pressures on the year and 14 sacks being second in the nation. I mean, he's going to be a name that I think we're talking about here, and a name that we might be talking about come Senior Bowl time, because this is a senior, and I'd expect him to show up and put out some nasty clips there in Mobile.
Yeah, I love it when teams try to block your best defender with like the tight end running back combo.
Yeah.
Of like, let's just throw like a couple of guys at him, and he just like mercilessly like swim move, and he's just at the quarterback. It's like, yeah, what did you think was going to happen, But yeah, this was a dominant showing from a player that, like you said, has been having a really nice season and might be a little bit under the radar because he's a little undersized because he plays at a smaller school. He's not getting the like top name buzz like maybe somebody we'll talk about later. And But yeah, a special season, by far his best season he had at Boston College in his 4 years. He had 8 sacks his sophomore year, just 2 in his freshman and junior years. So it was a nice little bounce back season for him. And then, yeah, like you said, he'll light it up probably at the Combine and at Mobile and become one of those names, kind of like Keon White shot up the draft board a couple of years ago because of the athleticism and, some of the special stuff that he put on tape.
And Mike Green from Marshall and Donovan Ezeirauku from Boston College, the 2 leading sack artists in college football this year. And both of them,
pretty good.
Both of them have badges here at Camp Dynasty, and we'll probably be talking about them later in the process as well. But all right, let's
go back to the top of the list here, because it's the last week. I didn't want to pick them, but you're like, hey man, it's the last week we can do this. And you're right. So I'm giving Ashton Jeanty the Heisman badge. I can't choose. It's too hard. Jeanty leads the nation in rush attempts, rush yards, 3rd in rushing yards per attempt, 1st in yards from scrimmage, 1st in rushing touchdowns, 1st in touchdowns from scrimmage, 1st in total touchdowns, 1st in total points, and Boise State's total offense is 4th in the nation. This player has been the driving force of college football this season, it seems. He's been narratively one of the most fun stories. He had another 226 yards on the ground against Oregon State, had a touchdown, put the ball on the ground again like he did a couple weeks ago against Nevada. But it's just like, how can you not shout out a player that has put together a season like this, a player that is very much deserving of the Heisman Award, and is the only reason there's any conversation about this is because of the other guy we mentioned earlier in the show. And I mean, like, if it were up to me, Jeanty'd be getting the Heisman. It's just like the story around Jeanty and like the team he's on and the accomplishments that he's compiled is nothing short of incredible. And a guy that has 2,300 yards, 28 touchdowns, it's like it's going to be a long time before you see something like this again.
Yeah. The consistency of this year is just, it's amazing to look at it. I mean, like early in the year, I think after the Oregon game, it was like, all right, you got me, you won me over. Like, you're not just a Mountain West merchant. And from that, from the start of the year to right now, just never missed a beat. Over 100 yards in every single game. This was his 5th 200+ yard rushing game of the season. This is and him fumbling in this game too. It was like coming into the year, it was like, man, he had 4 fumbles last year. What's that about? Now ends this year with 2. It's like, it's the kind of running back where I don't care. Like, yeah, right. I don't even care that you're putting the ball on the ground once in a while because of the impact that you're making 95% of the time when you're not. So he really is the sort of prospect where you're just going to, overlook any sort of like minor weaknesses that you see because everything else just jumps off the screen. And yeah, this was an incredible year. I don't know that we'll ever see something like this again, while we're doing Camp Dynasty.
Yeah. And just to put it into perspective, I know we've probably all seen this, but compared to the last 2 Heisman Trophy winning running backs, Derrick Henry in 2015 had 500 less yards and 6 less touchdowns. And Mark Ingram in 2009 had 800 less yards and 16 less touchdowns. So like, you put it into perspective and it's like, this is unbelievable. And there is the world where like they didn't give like Melvin Gordon his Heisman after his incredible season, and running backs generally are underappreciated and get it in years when there isn't another popular candidate, and there is in this case, which is why I highlighted him off the top, because it's like Travis Hunter will probably win it because he's getting he seems to be the media darling of the Heisman race, but like Ashton Jeanty very much is deserving of this award.
Also, we talked about it. He had already set these marks, but yards after contact and missed tackles forced, where did he end after a regular season? 1695 after contact. And yes, that would have led the nation by itself.
Yeah.
He was, I mean, we said it with Hampton, 1660. So he beat him by 35 yards just after contact. And then 123 missed tackles forced on the year is truly a number that I can't even comprehend. Because for the 3 years that we've been doing this, it's like you see guys over 70 and you're like, man, he's pretty elusive. That's pretty nice. And I mean, this is almost double that. And, 12 more in this game, sixth game of the year over 10. It's crazy stuff, man. And I'm very excited for him to become a part of the NFL draft cycle more than the college football cycle, because I do think that's where his name's really going to get to shine outside of the shadow of the Heisman race and everything else that's going on. So
he also had an even split of zone runs versus gap runs. He can do it in both styles. He had 7 runs of 10 yards or more in this last game, which was the most of that type of run that he's had all season. So potentially one of his best games. He just wasn't getting into the end zone. It's just like a season to remember from a player that we will remember forever.
You're going to make me cry, man. All right.
We're not going to have him on our teams.
Thanks.
Unless you blow it up.
I don't know. I got 1 week.
It's been looking rough. Stat changes don't save you here. Maybe.
Oh man. All right. Well, we're gonna go back to Colorado, and this one there is a little bit of let's give some players their flowers this week, and I feel like Shedeur deserves to get a badge this week. Despite the stat padding that was definitely happening in this game, it was one of his better statistical weeks of the season. He did have a good year. We haven't talked about him much. Most of the conversation about quarterbacks this year has been during the call home segment, but Shedeur did what he needed to do for the most part on the field to put his name in the conversation to be the number 1 quarterback in this class. We're going to talk about quarterbacks first when we get into rankings 2.0. So in 2 weeks, we'll have very firm understandings and takes on this quarterback group. But just watching this game and seeing what was going on, I mean, it's Shedeur. I mean, it's a lot of the stuff that you remember from last year, where he's got some wow throws. You see him working the ball down the field, putting some touch on his passes. And then you also see the sort of like Caleb Williams gene of like, there's rushers coming. He's kind of dancing around. He should probably get rid of it or try to get outside. And he's trying to do a little bit too much, takes a big sack. So there's obviously pros and cons. We know by now that this is not a particularly strong quarterback group, and that would include a player like Shedeur, but that doesn't mean that, this was a flop of a year. I think he did play his way into that conversation and maybe even likely to be the number 1 quarterback in this class.
Yeah, I think it's, like you said, it's a very interesting, very controversial quarterback class. And it seems like a lot of guys have fallen by the wayside while Shedeur Sanders has like stayed pretty steady. And it's like you've seen everything that you expected to see with Shedeur Sanders. Did you see any more than that, though? I guess is like my biggest question. And I don't know if you did. But regardless, like it seems like that's probably enough to move him into that QB1 conversation, because you think about the other guys. It's like we talked about Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck and Jalen Milroe, and all of those guys seem to like have had much worse seasons this year than they did previous. And you're hoping, obviously, to see them build on what they've shown coming up in the college ranks. And it's like Shedeur seems like he's gotten better, but like marginally, while all these guys have gotten worse marginally or stayed about the same. So it's like almost by default, I hate to say it like that, but like Shedeur, like number 4 pick, because he didn't get any worse in his last year. And like he can throw a ball accurately. If you can get him to play on time, I feel like he can be a quite good quarterback. But like if you throw him in the silver and black, it's going to be a little bit concerning, I think.
And there is definitely still an off the field part of this player that is very much a real thing when you think about him at the next level. The player that I'm excited the most to watch is Cam Ward. Yeah. Because I wonder, we neither of us watched Cam Ward in the summer, so his ascendance this year, and we talked about that earlier in the year, and I said pretty quickly, like, I think he's already played his way into being a top 5 quarterback in the class. I think that's very much still true today. How high is the question? And I think I could see a world based off of kind of just what I've seen from Cam and the sort of season that he had, where he could be the QB1 in this class. But that is something that we will know more about in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I'm very interested to like see this process. I pulled up one of my favorite websites, Tankathon. If you're keeping an eye on the top of the draft order, plug for them, because they keep track of win percentage, strength of schedule, games back of the worst records in the league. It's basically reverse ranking. So right now it's like quarterback needy teams. You have Vegas at 2, Giants at 3, and then like the Jets at 6, which I kind of like a lot. Because you think about what that team actually is, and sure, they could use O-line, sure, they could use a lot of things, but if he just goes to that team and has, Breece and Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams, it's like, could be a lot. It could be the Giants or Las Vegas,
I can't believe how excited I am to start talking big picture.
It's kind of magic.
Pulling up Tankathon, that's when you know it's getting real, man. By the way, run it up badge for Shedeur this week. So, all right. Next player. Interesting, because will he be in this draft class? That is something we are yet to find out.
Yeah, so we're going Elijah Sarratt. He had a nice season here at Indiana, who, kind of shocked all of college football. He's getting the under the radar badge, and that has mainly to do with Camp Dynasty. I don't think like Indiana's going under the radar. I don't think that he's sliding under the radar on this like kind of premier team, this story of college football. But this week he had 11 targets, 8 catches, 165 yards, 2 touchdowns. He looked just completely dominant in this Purdue game. He was getting open really early in routes, and he had both of his touchdowns were like over 20 yards. I think one was 30 plus, where he just beat a guy dead off the line and sprint to the end zone. The guy was just chasing him, had no chance. Another one, same story, different route, where he's running kind of a post crosser kind of thing where he beats him, gets over the middle, gets a touchdown. It's like this guy just like gets open. and it's pretty sick. It's like, oh, he had the 84-yarder where that was the kind of post route where he's just like beats the guy and outruns everybody. It's like this guy can get open and he can outrun people, and he's 6'2", 210. It's like kind of the perfect package. Now, did he put together the season that he wanted to like stamp himself into the NFL draft book? I don't know, because if you remember, 2022, he was at St. Francis. 2023, went to James Madison, had 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns. Comes to Indiana, they blow up as a program. His stats get a little bit subdued. He goes to 890 yards, 8 touchdowns on the season. Still a good season, but maybe not quite what he was expecting. And it's like, I want him to come out for the sake of the wide receiver class, but like I wouldn't blame you for going back and, you know, continuing this little bit of magic in Indiana.
Yeah, this wide receiver class is very interesting because I don't know that we have a very clear picture of what it's going to look like totally yet. And when we talked about Sarratt earlier this year, that was coming off of, 135 yards. He had several 100-yard games at that point. He's having a great year. It looks like he's on pace to have career bests in his first FBS season. And literally right after that week, they started getting into the meat of their schedule, and his numbers started to go down a little bit on a weekly basis. Now, finally, here jumping back up against a bad Purdue team. But as a junior, it makes you wonder, like, is there more meat left on this bone? Is he going to maybe want to run it back with Indiana next year and kind of become, the player that we both see in him? We both see this player with size that has a little bit of versatility that can separate maybe one more year. And we're talking about him as one of the better wide receivers in a class because, yeah, I think there's a lot of seniors in this year's class that are going to kind of fill in some of the gaps that we have seen where we have the top end talent and then it just kind of really opens up after that. And I'll be very curious to find out where we both land when we watch this class and see how it breaks down. But yeah, Sarratt, a player that had a really good year, see a lot of good things in him. It'll be a question of this year or next year.
Yeah, and then from the little bit of tape that I have dug into on him, it's like you see him blocking. He's getting downfield, and like that's huge for a guy that's not, one of the premier names. It boosts you up a little bit. You see guys that are not as talented as Sarratt is as like an outside receiver, getting on-field opportunities because they are willing to throw their body in the run game. And like when you have a big frame and you're willing to block, and then you can also like separate and you have strong hands at the catch point, it's like there's a little bit of a mix for a fun potion to brew right here with Sarratt.
And these outside run teams like Juwan Jennings, man, he made a name for himself blocking his ass off, and now look at him go. So
there's a reason that Jake Bobo was seeing the field more than JSN for a little while. It's like he's willing to get dirty in the run game. There's a reason Puka stuck with the Rams early on. It's like these guys are willing to get down and dirty, and like it'll give you opportunities to show what you can do in the pass game.
All right, let's talk about another wide receiver from this draft class. And this one confirmed to be a part of the draft class because he is a redshirt senior, and that is Xavier Restrepo. This is another one where I saw the week that he had, which was very good, and thought, man, I don't know that we can go a full 14 weeks without giving him at least one badge because he had a great year. This is back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons for Restrepo. Miami obviously has a great year, loses this week. Heartbreaker to Kyle McCord's Syracuse.
Kyle McCord's low-key been dealing?
I cannot get over the fact that Kyle McCord is a legitimate good quarterback right now. But Restrepo in this game, 9 catches, 148 yards, and a touchdown. He's getting the slot machine badge, just a pure slot, exactly what you think of when you picture slot receiver. Short, stocky build, 5'11", 5'10", 198. And he's playing 90% of his snaps out of the slot. But he's done that at a very high level for 2 years. He's a player that I think slots into this receiver group as more of the a role. Yeah, you like that?
Slots in. All right.
More of a specialized kind of role player type based off of what I've seen from him. But maybe there's surprises on his film from this year because this was his best year. He was Cam Ward's go-to guy, and yeah, huge week this week in the finale.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, okay, yeah, they do have the stat on here. Thanks, BFF. First downs. It feels like Restrepo is always like at the marker. And in this game, 8 of 9 catches were for first downs or touchdowns. That is a trend you see in a lot of these games. I mean, last week, 5 catches, 4 first downs. The week prior, 4 catches, 3 first downs. I mean, you can go down the list where this guy like is Mr. Reliable. We kind of talked about Roman Wilson that way last year, where he was Michigan's go-to guy on third and, important downs, on the money downs. Who are you looking for? And it seems like Miami's guy was Restrepo, and it's a lot easier when you have a guy in the slot where he can work. I mean, he is so smart against zone, where he is finding the soft spot. He's sitting down. Him and Cam Ward seem to have this connection where he's finding him on time while he's like low and away from defenders. He's sitting down, avoiding contact. It's a pretty impressive trait to have, and it's an important trait to have for a guy that, again, like to stick on NFL rosters, you need to be able to do the important things, like be reliable and have like an outlet for a quarterback to know you're going to be exactly in the right spot at the right time, on the right down, running the right route. And it seems like Restrepo gained that with Cam Ward in just a year. Like, switch quarterbacks, doesn't matter. I'm doing the same thing.
And certainly not a burner type in the slot, but he's got that yak ability that you're looking for from a player like this, that's catching the ball in the middle of the field and making plays with it. 503 yards after the catch this year. That was 7th in college football. So a fun player and kind of a, an indicator maybe of where this wide receiver class is going to be, where we're kind of looking at some of these experienced senior receivers that are coming off of these good seasons. And Restrepo might just be one of the best of the bunch.
77% of his catches were for first downs or touchdowns.
Not bad.
Come on.
It's going to be your guy this year, isn't it?
I'm just like, that's pretty good, man.
It is. All right. One more badge for 2024. Bring us home.
We're going to an IDP. Bring us back. Abdul Carter getting another badge. He's getting the relentless badge. He had 6 pressures in this game against Maryland, 2 sacks, 3 QB hits, 1 hurry. This is the guy that has jumped up for me in the IDP rankings, where we were, pretty set on James Pierce as the IDP one. And I'm not saying he isn't at this point, but after like digging into tape and everything, I'll know for sure. But it seems like Abdul Carter has made a very clear case for himself to potentially unseat him as IDP 1 and DE 1, and put himself in the conversation to be taken very highly in the NFL draft because of what he did in this season. He can do it inside, he can do it outside. He has multiple alignments. We talked about the position switch going from off ball to on ball, getting his hand in the dirt. And not only has he succeeded, he's exceeded those expectations, where He, 10 sacks in basically his first full year playing this position and playing it in a not so easy scheme where he's not just being asked to, get to the edge and bend around the tackle. He's getting asked to do a lot of different stuff. So I've been very impressed with Carter through the season. I was impressed with him this game. I mean, he had a nasty move over the guard in this game to get his first sack to basically shut down a Maryland drive. And it's like, yeah, this is, a fun player that's going to end up being pretty high in the NFL draft. And I'm going to probably want him on at least one of my teams because.
Yeah, great year. I'm very excited to dive into this season for Carter because, I mean, when we talked about him in the summer, we were working off of tape that wasn't even necessarily indicative of what he was going to be doing this upcoming season and what he's expected to do in the NFL. So to see this kind of a year from him with 10 sacks, being one of the most productive pass rushers in the nation, having one of the highest win rates in the nation, incredible stuff from him. And this like loose, Micah Parsons vibe comp, whatever you want to call it. Like it's getting more and more real sounding, every single week at this point. And so we'll get to find out for sure exactly, how he stacks up and where he belongs in this class in a few weeks. But yeah, for an edge class that was kind of a little bit weird, I think in the summer, we were a little bit unsure about it outside of Pierce and then, the speculation of Carter. I feel like we've seen some guys emerge this year that make it a little bit more exciting than it was in the summertime, but Carter, like you said, might just be surging his way to the very top.
Yeah, and Maryland had a 4th and 1, and Abdul Carter just like stonewalls the tackle and like walks him into the backfield and ends up getting an assisted tackle for loss to stop this 4th and 1. But it's like, it seems like a 250, 6'3" guy. He looks a little smaller, but you see the power on those kind of plays where it's like, man, he is moving people. And I mean, not only doing it in the pass game, but in the run game too.
There it is. An entire college football season's worth of badges at Camp Dynasty. But the fun does not end here. The fun really is only just beginning because now we turn our attention toward draft season. But hold on a second, because there's one thing we still have to do for week 14. And that is something that is always a little bit upsetting, but has to happen. And that is the call home. And this week, we're making a double call, or the player that we're calling about has been called now multiple times this year. And it kind of comes off of the conversation that we've been having a little bit about the wide receiver class and why it's a little bit weird and why we're still not even entirely sure what it's going to look like yet. And one of the reasons for that is that Isaiah Bond did not have the sort of season that either of us expected. And that culminated this week into his first catchless game of the season. 3 targets against Texas A&M, big game, big showdown on Saturday night. Isaiah Bond held without a catch. So I think we talked about this the first time we called him. Now we have an entire season, to fall back on to say he never became the player that we wanted him to become in this offense. This seemed like a perfect fit for his skill set and how they operated with Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell last year for a player like this to come in and instantaneously become that sort of an impact wide receiver in this offense. And he did not do that. He actually regressed in terms of yardage, in terms of receptions from his year at Alabama last year. So I know stats aren't everything, and we say that a lot because it's very important to remember that. And I do still think that the traits that Bond has make him an alluring wide receiver, especially in a class like this. However, what kind of weight do you put in this kind of a season for Bond?
It's a good question. The name of this game with Isaiah Bond was opportunity and what can you do with it? Because it seemed like he was lacking opportunity at Alabama. He had, 671 yards, looked pretty promising in 2023. Comes over to Texas with a gutted wide receiver core, and it's like, all right, what can you do when it's like, Matthew Golden, DeAndre Moore, Silas Bolden, Jonte Cook, like these guys don't have the name value that Isaiah Bond brings to this program. And he brings a style that Quinn Ewers was obviously very comfortable playing with in 2023, like you said, with Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy especially, where it's like this guy is a burner and he can get open, downfield, and it just never coalesced to something impressive. It never seemed like he had a couple moments, but it never seemed like there was an extended period of like, all right, I'd say Bond's finally putting it together, like everything's going well for him. But I don't know, like I feel like it has to hold weight. It has to move him down a bit. The NFL loves speed. The NFL will probably find a way to put him on the field, but like I thought that way about Marvin Mims too. And we see like he's a gadget guy that gets a couple deep targets and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. So far it hasn't really worked out for Bond.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what this season looked like at Texas because it doesn't really seem to make any sense to me how we could end up here. I mean, we were floating around the name Jalen Waddle in the summer, like Alabama wide receiver, smaller than Waddle, but similar skill set. Could he take that jump at Texas?
Right.
And it felt like he should have. It felt like everything was there for him. And Texas had a great year. And, the quarterbacks, kind of mixing and matching at times this year with Ewers getting hurt. But, I mean, they weren't even from what I've seen and from what it looks like on the screen in front of me. Where are the scheme touches? Like get the ball in his hands like they were doing with Xavier Worthy a ton last year and let him use his best asset to his advantage. But you just didn't get to see a lot of that this year. I mean, some of the numbers, like just purely number side, like 8.1 yards after the catch per reception. That's excellent. Like that is the sign of a player that when you get the ball in his hands, he can make big plays. But the volume just wasn't there. So we'll get to understand, of course, much better. Like maybe he's getting open. I mean, maybe he's getting open all the time and they're just for some reason not able to find him. But when you see a guy, number 3 receiver on Texas in terms of yardage this year and the tight ends, number 1, I mean, that's much different than the Texas we saw last year. So what caused 100%. That? And that's what we'll find out. But
it just feels like some offenses, the guys are so open and it's like easy and guys are getting the ball in rhythm. And sometimes it just looks really hard. And it seems like Texas is the latter more than the former.
Maybe it's just Quinn Ewers.
I mean, yeah.
Oh, man.
Why are we all looking forward to Arch Manning?
Well, Texas's season is not done. So there may be more Isaiah Bond moments to come. And I hope that there are because it's a fun player that I want to see show up on the big stage coming up here. But That is the bad news of the week, and we don't end on it. And we will be ending around the campfire for one final time this season. We will revisit our 2024 campers, our rookies from this year. We will revisit them in a couple of months when the season ends, and we will redraft the class. But for now, Collin, our last opportunity to talk about the campers of old during All Grown Up. So what do you got for me this week?
My KTC today, we got AJ Brown. Got some heavy hitters here. Got Drake London. Got Puka Nacua.
Oh, no. All right. Well, we're going to keep AJ Brown.
We're going to keep AJ. We're going to trade Puka, and we're going to cut Drake London.
I mean, I guess. I want to trade London. You know that I do, but
I know London's your guy. I think the people will agree with me here.
It's Penix time, baby. That's it. Hey, all grown up. It's Penix time.
Here we go.
I can't watch another week of Kirk Cousins throw ducks to the other team.
Man, it was brutal. Like, there was a question of, like, was it a miscommunication with Darnell Mooney, or was it just, like, Kirk Cousins not having any juice? And, I mean, either way, that pick six that he threw was disgusting. It's like, I know Penix is getting that ball out there. I could tell you that. Whether or not he can make, the 28 other throws, I don't know. But I know he's putting a little more mustard on it than that. The pathetic, like, little, oh, God.
All right. So because this is the last week, and we will get to have a greater conversation once the NFL season has wrapped, but I do feel like it's important to take this opportunity to just kind of talk about things at a pretty high level, like what happened this year. And I think one of the things that jumps out at me is, again, this hyper reactionary discourse. Like I'm looking right here, KTC, Marvin Harrison Jr. is currently the number 3 rated rookie. Dynasty wide receiver 8, which is still very high, despite the fact that you could call his rookie season a disappointment. And I think how we build it all of last year, and especially after the Cardinals landing spot, I think it is accurate to call it a disappointment from a production standpoint. But I have seen some crazy stuff on my timeline about Marvin, like that he was, they called him generational and he's just fine and stuff like that. And so I think when I'm looking at this class and when I'm thinking about, a year later, where are we and what does it all mean? I mean, I still think it's important to recognize, like, this was year one. Like, this was just year one. And it means something. It doesn't mean everything. So a player like Marvin Harrison Jr., where are you with him today?
The season's not over, I would say, first of all. Second of all, I'd say I'm disappointed with his rookie season so far. I don't think that like, I'm surprised, but also maybe expectations were too high. Like, obviously expectations were too high. But I also feel like the Cardinals are, like, not helping him a whole lot. And I said this earlier in the season when he was having some early season struggles. It feels like the Cardinals are, like, asking him to be a, like AJ Brown, when he is very clearly much more of a, like, Devontae Smith, where he's a guy that's going to be open a lot and get him the ball like underneath, get him open on some crossers. Kind of the same conversation we were just having with Isaiah Bond. It's like I feel like there's nothing easy going his way where they're throwing it to him down the field a lot. They're throwing it to him fade routes and boundary routes when he succeeded so much on his technical ability in college and like timing routes and getting open and using the body control coming back to the ball towards the sideline rather than going upfield down the sideline. It seems like a little bit of a misuse. Now, I think he can grow into the role that they have, kind of pushed him into. Whether or not, like, he is going to, like, I think he'll eventually live up to that generational tag that was thrown on him. But I think it'll take some time. Like, it seems like it wasn't the toss it in the microwave for 30 seconds and it's done. It seems like you might have to, bake it at 350 for 25 minutes and kind of let it sit.
Yeah, I think it's, once upon a time, I feel like this wasn't as big of a deal as it is now. Like, right. I feel like once upon a time it was like, yeah, I mean, he's having a good year. Like, he's having a good year. He just made a ridiculous touchdown catch this last weekend. Mm-hmm. So, why is there the need to, like, nitpick his rookie year and say, well, it wasn't like this, or, he's not Malik Neighbors, so it's like, well, we can have a conversation about Malik Neighbors right now, too. We can have a conversation about any of these guys.
Yeah.
And part of this conversation is also this question. Who would you rather have? Like, straight up. Like, there's a trade in your inbox. It's straight up. Rome Odunze, Vlad McConkey.
Man. I feel like you want to bet on Rome and, like, keep it pushing. But, like, Lad's going to be the wide receiver 1 in LA. He's proven that he can do it. Like, the things that I was worried about with Lad have gone by the wayside with his NFL career. And, like, Rome is going to be slotted behind DJ. Can he have a nice career? Absolutely. Do I still believe in Rome? I do. But, like, if Lad is going to be Keenan Allen in Los Angeles, you can convince me.
I just think it's funny. I just think it's funny how these things materialize over time and how easy it is. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but how easy it is.
It's okay to say it's wrong.
Well, you know what side I'm on.
Of course.
And I think it's important to say that what is true today is not necessarily true tomorrow, meaning this is Dynasty.
Yeah.
And I think it's every year, I think it becomes harder and harder for us as we live in a world where there is information barraging us at every single second. And we're sitting on social media, and the clip of the play at the end of the game that got Eberflus fired where Rome didn't track the ball very well. And then you have social media, you see all these tweets like, what is Rome doing? Oh my God. And then in the same timeline, a few tweets later, you're seeing tweets about how Lad McConkey is quickly becoming a top Dynasty wide receiver, and there's not many wide receivers I'd take over McConkey going into 2025. And you start to see all of this information in front of you, and it starts to become very easy to convince yourself, well, yes, what's true today is that's just what it is. And when you play a game like this, where there are years of time required sometimes for things to materialize, that can be a dangerous game to play. But we play it more and more every year, and I'm just as guilty of it as anybody else. So I think that conversation, Rome versus Ladd, I think is a great microcosm for Dynasty as a whole. Whatever side you land on in that conversation tells me exactly what kind of Dynasty player you are.
Right.
And there's no right answer. There's no correct answer. Because we don't know. That's
true.
The thing. We don't know.
It's the beauty of it. It's like with Rome, I will say it's like he is open a lot in Chicago, and he is being missed a fair amount in Chicago. And he had a flash early in the season, and if he does that, 2-3 times, we're having a different kind of conversation about the player. If he catches that pass, if that pass is where he expects it to be, and he scores there, wins them the game, I feel like that those little things can affect discourse, which is not exactly the right way to be coming to conclusions about players' careers and the futures that they're going to have in front of them.
We do a lot of work preparing for a Dynasty rookie draft and understanding what a class looks like. And I don't think all that work should just go out the window after 13 weeks of an NFL season.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, the other side of the coin, and we've talked about this player quite a bit already this year, but Bucky Irving having a massive performance this week. 20 plus carries, getting involved as a receiver. I mean, at what point now, and now here's where the other side of this comes in. At what point do you say, all right, this is just real? Like, this is just who this player is? Because we both liked the player a lot, but I think there were reservations about his size and what his role would look like in the NFL. And then, of course, going on day 3 doesn't help, and the combine numbers didn't help. You have all of that factoring in. But he right now on KTC is RB11 in Dynasty. He's a top 12 Dynasty running back, according to KTC. Is that warranted?
Man, Bucky Irving, I tried trading for him today. I'll say that. I was like, hey, playoffs are coming up. I could use another back. He's been on a tear late in this season, and I offered a first. I got turned down. I'll say that. And I was like, oh, man, I get it, but, that hurts because I felt like that was a lot to send for Bucky. But, yeah, I feel like we're in a pretty good place with Irving because he has firmly unseated Rachaad White there. The offense there is, prolific. He's been the beneficiary where he's been churning out, big plays. He's been doing exactly what he did at Oregon, and I wish we would have, stuck to our guns a little bit more. We talked a little bit about this before the show where we're like, man, we loved Bucky Irving, but then, the combine happens, he has the bad RAS, and then he's, a 4th round pick in the NFL draft, and it's like, it kind of turns you off of the guy a little bit. But then he does exactly what he did in college. He looks like the same player, and you're like, man, I wish I would have, stuck my neck out a little bit more for this kind of player. So whether or not he deserves to be there, he's been playing at that level, and it doesn't seem like he's giving them a reason to move on from them. He's doing just about everything right, and they said they were going to commit to the hot hand approach a few weeks ago, and it seems like he's just been the hot hand consistently for the last 3-4 weeks.
Here's another fun question: Bucky Irving or Sam Laporta?
Where are they near each other in the rankings? Is that
yep.
why? Okay. I feel like I would want Laporta just because tight ends are so hard to come by, but like I get why they're close.
And that's why it's funny. Because 1 year ago, what was the conversation with Laporta?
He's the tight end one.
He's the prince that was promised, tight end one. He's taken hold of it. He's not looking back. He's maybe rookie of the year in your fantasy league. At this point in time, 2024, Bucky Irving is 2 spots ahead of Sam Laporta on KTC. So just 1 year, the sort of difference that can happen for a player that is producing in an extreme fashion to now they are falling down dynasty rankings and being taken over by a player, a day 3 running back that's looking phenomenal. I mean, it's
funny because the whole book on Sam Laporta was like he scores a lot of touchdowns and like doesn't get a ton of yards. And now, last couple of weeks he's been scoring touchdowns again. And it's like, oh, Sam Laporta's back. It's like, well, he had 3 receptions. Like it's the same story, but just a different year. So, I mean, I wouldn't overreact too much on Laporta, but it is exciting to see where Bucky Irving is and how far he's climbed.
Who else?
Well, Monday Night Football was last night. Usually we do this on Mondays, but we're doing this on Tuesday this week, so got to watch Monday Night Football. And Bo Nix, man, he's kind of slinging the pill all over the field. Like, he had the throw to Marvin Mims that was like 60 yards on a rope. And he's just made some very impressive plays. And I'm not going to say I hated Bo Nix, but it was pretty close to that. Like, I did not believe that Bo Nix could do this. And he is completely, like, week after week, I'm like, well, this will be the week that Bo Nix is, bad again. And it seems like he kind of got over that rookie hump early in the season and has just gotten pretty comfortable as an NFL quarterback. And he's been dealing all over the field and, revived this Broncos offense, revived Cortland Sutton, has, brought a lot of these guys into a new type of, I mean, they're in the wild card race. They won that huge game last night, overcame Jameis's heroic performance. It's like, I can't keep holding on to the priors about Bo Nix of like, he's a system guy at Oregon that's, low ADOT merchant. It seems like he's kind of outgrown that a little bit.
I think the best way to sum it up is that I saw an Oregon fan, Justice Mosqueda, good follow on Twitter. He was like, where was this Bo Nix at Oregon?
And he's like running around.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to be said about, what you see on film with a player, and then sometimes there's just room to grow. I mean, and it's the same conversation we had once upon a time with Justin Herbert, another Oregon quarterback, where there was a lot of criticism about Herbert coming out in the draft that year because of his low ADOT and because of how he was being used in the Oregon scheme. And then he gets to the NFL and he's showing off this howitzer and throwing it 60 yards down the field and getting the deep vertical passing game going. And it was like, oh my God, like, I can't believe we ever doubted this guy. And that's kind of what we're seeing with Nix. There was an element of his game that was untapped. And to be clear, there were deep shots. Troy Franklin, I mean, that was a real connection last year. Deep passes down the field. It was an explosive offense at times during the year. I don't think either of us thought, he can't throw the ball deep. I think it was more of he was very firmly within the confines of that system. It was very apparent that when he got outside of structure at Oregon, things really broke down for him. And now we're seeing him being proficient out of structure, scrambling, making plays on the run, scrambling and making plays with his feet. I mean, he really does look like a different player this year. So, yeah, I mean, hell of a find for the Broncos. That widely criticized pick in the first round, and he's looking like everything they've needed at that position.
Who's the defensive player I wanted to talk about? This is why IDP are not actually people.
No, they're not.
I can't remember. Who's going to win defense or rookie of the year this year, do you think?
Jared Verse.
There you go.
King.
There you go.
So that's a fun one. IDPs. Where is Jared Verse? Like if you're thinking Dynasty DL, how high is he at this point?
Well, currently in our scoring system, he is 10th in rookie scoring. So that's just below Malik Neighbors, just above Marvin Harrison. I mean, let me look at the list real quick. Put me on the spot here, but man,
I've put you in a few tough spots.
I mean, I just asked you who I am thinking of, and you actually answered it, so I'm pretty impressed. I mean, I like him more than Burns. I like him more than Rousseau, who he's behind in points right now. I'd probably put him like 9 behind. I mean, the top guys. I don't know. Is Andrew Van Ginkel going to keep it up? I don't know.
I feel like if you offered me,
Jared first.
Yeah.
Same with like Nick Bonito, Jonathan Grenard. Maybe he's like.
And Bonito looked really good last night.
He did, and he had a pick 6. But he's top 10. I'll say that.
Yeah. Like still, I mean, Crosby, Garrett, Watt, like. Those guys are probably still firmly at the top, but I think Jared Verse has a case to be made by the end of this year to be like rapidly encroaching in that territory. So yeah, like bottom half of the top 10.
Yeah,
and probably a good buy maybe going in at that price. Like a player that you could see over the next couple of years ascending into that tier pretty easily. Based off of the season that he's had this year.
Grabbed him a couple weeks ago in my other league. Felt pretty good.
You know, I'm going to be trying to grab him after this season, but yeah, there's like 50 other names we could talk about. Anybody else catching your fancy? This is your last chance.
I know. It's kind of scary. Brian Thomas Jr. is obviously really good. Caleb Williams has been unlocked by his new offensive coordinator, and his head coach let him down. Yeah, man. I mean, Jonathan Brooks, he had a nice little play last week where, hello, welcome to the NFL. Panthers are kind of fun to watch.
You know what's funny about that? Chuba Hubbard gets the extension. Jonathan Brooks is dead. And then there's one clip, and everyone's like, "Hey, he's gonna be fun as hell next year, isn't he?"
Yep.
Same thing happened with Trey Benson. James Conner gets the extension. He's dead.
Yep.
All it takes is one clip.
I mean, one of our friends was like, "I've been watching this clip on repeat for an hour." It's like that's what the Jonathan Brooks drafters have. They have that clip and hope it moves them into next season.
It's a good player, man. And a very young player. This season was not at all unexpected for me. Like him coming back from the ACL, being, only 21, I think at this point, like they're going to ease him in. And by next year, I think you start to see the work start moving his way. So again, it's Dynasty, man. It's why we play this game. And so anybody that is, panicked about the year that Brooks didn't have,
send him to me.
Yeah, right. Makes him a great opportunity.
Yep. What a year.
What a year. What a year. And it's not over yet. So still some weeks left for our 2024 guys to show what they have, make an impact, put a good taste in our mouth, ending their rookie seasons.
Hello.
And then we will be back for a redraft where we will get very deep, very intimate with the 2024
right,
class.
easy.
Sorry. A little overdoing it a little bit.
If you stayed for the hour 20, you get into the...
But that is not only week 14 of college football and week 13 of the NFL, but it is the ending of a chapter here at Camp Dynasty for 2020 for the 2025 cycle. Next week, we will be back with a 2025 Dynasty rookie mock. We put out rankings like 7 weeks ago now, and people are like, where's the next mock? I need a new mock. Well, you're getting it. It's coming. It's still only December, but we're going to do...
Hey, you degenerates, relax.
But I
get it. You guys
it.
won't be on teams for another 4 months.
But I fucking get it, man, because I am chomping at the bit to do a mock draft and to consume hundreds of mock drafts over the next 6 months. So I'm very much looking forward to that. That'll be fun. Kickstarting the new chapter for us here and getting into officially draft season here at Camp Dynasty. It's always an exciting moment. If you enjoyed our discussion about week 14 of college football, be sure to find us on Twitter at Camp_Dynasty and TikTok at Camp.Dynasty and subscribe to our YouTube channel where video feeds of the pods do go up every week. You can get in touch with us in any of those places. Let us know, hey, where the hell is the mock draft? Get it out. We will do it in due time. So, and
sneak peek. Ashton Jeanty's going number 1 in the mock.
What? No way. Hey, I don't know. There's going to be some interesting conversations next week. I don't know. It's Travis Hunter goes number 1 overall in the NFL draft, and he's playing wide receiver. I mean, is there a conversation?
Nope.
Save it for next week.
Yeah,
damn it.
Sorry.
And like, rate, review, subscribe, share, and follow the pod feed as well, because we very much appreciate that. And thank you for tuning in for another season. I know, only the diehards listen through the college football season, and we appreciate it. So,
damn right. See you every week. It only gets more fun from here.
Damn right. So we'll be back next week. Mock draft. It's happening. I'm ready for it. Thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week, and we'll see you next week.